ballroom chandelier cast a soft amber glow over the polished marble floor, as guests in tuxedos and evening gowns drifted between crystal chandeliers and satin-draped tables. At the center of the room stood an elevated platform draped in ivory linen, behind which a polished mahogany lectern awaited its next speaker. The annual Monarch Trust Charity Gala was in full swing. Well-heeled patrons sipped champagne flutes of bubbling Prosecco. Servers in crisp black vests glided among them, bearing trays of seared scallops and miniature beef, Wellington, and a string. Quartet tucked into a corner loft serenaded the crowd with a gentle waltz. Among the dignitaries seated in the front row was Senator Caldwell, his white hair gleaming beneath the chandelier's shimmer. Beside him, the gala's president, a silver-haired socialite named Veronica Hastings, fluttered her diamond bracelet and beamed at the assembled benefactors. Marisol Kane, 42, dressed in a sleek midnight blue sheath gown that hugged her shoulders and fell to the floor in a gentle train, stepped into the soft spotlight. Her heart thudded against the silk lining of her bodice, but her posture was unwavering. As the Monarch Trust's newest board member, she had spent months orchestrating tonight's highlight, an appeal to raise funds for after-school arts programs in under-resourced neighborhoods. She approached the podium with graceful confidence, then paused to let the warm applause ripple over the hushed crowd. The quartet's final chords faded and the room exhaled its attention. "Good evening," Marisol began, voice steady and clear. Her accent carried the measured tones of someone who had honed her public speaking before city councils and corporate boards alike. "Thank you all for being here tonight to support the arts, an investment in our children's creativity, resilience, and future leadership." She clicked the remote at her side, and a giant projection screen behind her flickered to life, displaying a montage of smiling students painting murals, sculpting clay, and performing dance routines under the glow of spotlights. Gusts of admiration and nods of approval rippled through the audience as the images played in silent montage. But as she launched into her quietly passionate plea, describing how a single $500 donation could supply art materials for an entire semester, an interruption cut through her cadence like a crack of thunder. A man in a tailored grey dinner jacket seated near the back on the terrace side rose to his feet and shouted, "What's the point of spending money on their kind of art when they can't even pay rent?" The hush that followed was electric. Conversation died mid-chatter. Servers froze mid-step. The quartet's violinist halted mid-bow. Marisol's breath caught as she recognized the cruelty behind their kind, a thinly veiled reference to the mostly black and Latino students in the program. The man's companions erupted in rude laughter. "Yeah," he jeered, voice rising. "Your people don't deserve taxpayer dollars for your arts and crafts." A ripple of applause followed from a small group at a private table, an overt display of approval so brazen it left the room recoiling in shock. Eyes flicked away, jaws clenched. In one corner, a young staffer began to cry softly into her napkin. Marisol felt the air thicken with hostility, as though the walls themselves bristled with prejudice. Her chest tightened, pulse racing, but her voice did not falter. She stepped forward, pressed both palms to the lectern, and waited. Her hand hovered above the microphone's button. For a moment, silence was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. Then she pressed the mic, and her voice carried like a clarion. "If you believe art is a privilege reserved for some and not for all," she said, tone low but unmistakable, "then you have not met the artists we serve." Her gaze swept the room, not with anger, but with unyielding resolve. The man's laughter died on his lips. His companions turned pale. Even Senator Caldwell set aside his champagne, leaning forward with a look of dawning realization. Marisol allowed that single sentence to hang in the air, then continued. "Art is the mirror of our humanity. It is how we heal, how we connect, and how we dream together, regardless of the zip code where we were born." Her words rang in the hush, each syllable sculpting the silent energy of the room. For the first time all evening, not a single person dared to breathe. In that captured moment, Marisol Kane had reclaimed the night. She transformed hostility into introspection, bigotry into a challenge. And the crowd, dead silent, felt the weight of their own conscience awaken under the glow of that chandelier. The echo of Marisol's voice lingered over the hushed ballroom like a tremor, and in that pregnant silence she felt the old fear of failure, of conflict, brush against her confidence. But instead of recoiling, she inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of every eye upon her. With a gentle gesture, she signaled for the aides to dim the chandelier lights and cast a soft amber wash upon the stage, isolating her in a pool of glow that seemed to grant her courage. From the darkness behind her, one of the evening's student performers, a shy 13-year-old, whom she had invited to open the program, emerged clutching a violin case. Marisol nodded and the boy stepped onto the platform, the scratch of his formal shoes on the polished marble louder than any applause. The orchestra, stunned into submission, rose together at his signal, and within moments a single crystalline note resonated through the hall. As his bow met the strings, Marisol lowered herself into a single chair beside the lectern, watching the notes swirl in the air, each one a testament to hours of practice under flickering studio lights and second-hand music stands. Around her, the guests, many of whom had been sneering only moments before, still perched at the edges of their seats, faces softened by the boy's earnest concentration. She closed her eyes and recalled the first time she had seen him rehearsing in a cramped community center, his small hands trembling against the violin's neck, transforming his fear into beauty. When the final note quivered into silence, the boy lowered his instrument with a shy bow, and for the first time since the interruption, the room exhaled as one. Then, without missing a beat, Marisol rose and approached the front of the stage once more. "That," she said, voice rich with warmth, "is what our children achieve when we invest in their dreams instead of dismissing them." The projection screen behind her flickered to life again, displaying a photograph of the same boy, smiling wide as he cradled his violin next to his single mother, both beaming at the first recital they had ever attended. Gasps of recognition spread. They saw that these were not abstract faces, but neighbors, students who lived and learned and hoped in their city. She walked slowly down the steps, the hem of her gown whispering across the floor, and paused before the table where the heckler sat, slack-jawed and suddenly pale. Looking him directly in the eye, she spoke quietly but clearly. "That young man does not need your judgment. He needs your support." Then she pressed a button on the remote to reveal a simple plea. $250 provides an instrument and lessons for 1 year. Behind her, the orchestra began a gentle cello accompaniment as she scanned the room for a moment, allowing the visual of that boy's ambition to settle into hearts. Toward the back, where the man had sat, a single patron rose slowly and placed an envelope on the nearest table. Others followed one by one, until all the tables bore packets of checks, pledges, and handwritten notes of encouragement. Murmurs of "I'm in and what can I do?" grew into a harmonious murmur that swept the ballroom. As the lights brightened again, Marisol realized she had done more than silence prejudice. She had redirected its energy into action, transformed shame into generosity, and reminded every person in that gilded hall that true charity begins when we choose empathy over contempt. The moment the first envelope landed on the table, the air shifted from awkward silence to a quiet, determined energy that rippled across the ballroom like a rising tide. Guests who had come expecting an evening of polite applause and cushioned banter now leaned forward, envelopes in hand, stepping toward the desks of Gala volunteers to record their donations. Marisol watched with a steady smile as a prominent venture capitalist, one who had scoffed at her plea, approached her personally, envelope extended, eyes brimming with apology. I misjudged," he murmured, voice low. "Please forgive me. I want to help." In that single act, the last of the cold bravado melted away. At the far end of the room, the string quartet quietly restarted a soft waltz, its melody threading through conversations about commitments and promises. Marisol slipped down from the stage and navigated between rows of guests, personally thanking each donor. With the director of a regional arts council, She sealed a $10,000 pledge earmarked for weekend workshops. Beside a table of college students, she coordinated a peer mentoring partnership that would match students with professional artists. She paused to speak with a gruff, silver-haired philanthropist, a man who, earlier in the evening, had been overheard dismissing community arts as a frivolous expense. Now his handshake was firm, his gaze earnest as he declared, "Consider me a founding patron." Marisol's heart swelled not with triumph, but with a deep gratitude. This was the real work of the gala, the bridges mended in moments of vulnerability. As the final envelopes were counted, more than double the event's target, Marisol guided the gala president, Veronica Hastings, to the lectern once more. Veronica, ordinarily the picture of poised elegance, blinked back tears as she raised a final glass. "Tonight, we have witnessed the true spirit of generosity," she said, voice catching, "not through obligation, but through awakened compassion." The room erupted in warm applause, no longer perfunctory, but heartfelt. A student violinist from earlier joined them on stage, lifting his bow in salute before returning to his seat, the bronze strings of his instrument alight with pride. In the quieter moments that followed, as servers cleared champagne flutes and the scent of fading hors d'oeuvres drifted into the night air, Marisol found the man who had shouted his bigotry. He stood alone by a window overlooking the city lights, his shoulders slumped. She approached him, envelope in hand, and offered a gentle nod. He looked up, eyes haunted by regret. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice thick. Marisol smiled with unexpected warmth. "Thank you for correcting your course." He accepted the envelope, a token of his own redemption, and watched as she slipped back into the throng of supporters. Before the night ended, local reporters arrived to capture soundbites. Lead donors describing why they'd changed their minds, parents of arts program students sharing hopes for the future. Outside the ballroom doors, volunteers gathered the stacks of checks and pledge forms, while Marisol and Veronica reviewed the running total on the gala's digital thermometer. 520,000 tons, far beyond their original $250,000 goal. The figures glowed on the screen, an electric testament to a community that had chosen empathy over exclusion. As Marisol finally slipped her heels from her feet and stepped onto the empty dance floor, now strewn with fallen program booklets and a lone music stand, she took a slow, deep breath. The memory of that hostile interruption still lingered, but it had been transformed into something far more powerful. A collective promise to value art as a bridge between people rather than a privilege for a few. Under the amber glow of the chandelier, she whispered a quiet vow to carry this lesson forward, knowing that real change often begins the moment someone dares to grab the mic and speak from the heart. In the days following the gala, Marisol's phone never rested. Meeting invitations, press requests, and heartfelt emails cascaded into her inbox, each one a ripple from the moment she reclaimed the evening. On Monday morning, she arrived at the Monarch Trust's downtown offices to find a new urgency in the atmosphere. The gala's record-breaking pledges had triggered an immediate board meeting to finalize the first round of grants. As she took her seat at the long oak table, its surface still warm from the previous night's champagne toasts, she noted the eagerness in every director's eyes. The vice chair opened the session. "Thanks to last week's outburst and your response, Marisol, we have more funds than ever before. Let's decide how to deploy them." Marisol leaned forward, unfurling a thick binder of vetted program proposals. First on the list was the Community Arts Center in Eastwood. Its paint peeling, its stage rotting, its budget slashed to the bone. She described how $150,000 would restore its roof, replace the dimming stage lights, and hire 2 part-time art instructors. The board members, some of whom had doubted the value of community arts, nodded as she spoke, recalling the violinist's bow that had silenced bigotry itself. Next, she proposed a series of traveling exhibitions in underserved neighborhoods. Mural projects co-designed by local youth and professional artists, each backed by a $50,000 stipend to ensure materials and stipends for participants. As she moved through each item, drama workshops in juvenile centers, mobile sculpture labs for parks, a scholarship fund for high school seniors pursuing creative degrees, the directors filled their notepads with check marks and crossed out reservations. By afternoon's end, the board had unanimously approved every proposal. $400,000 for facility restorations, $200,000 for traveling arts initiatives, and $100,000 to launch a mentorship network connecting students with working artists. Marisol exhaled, the satisfaction in the room almost tangible. She had packed the binder, already imagining the first mural taking shape on a blank wall downtown. That weekend, she visited Eastwood Arts Center, its once leaky roof now patched and painted in bold geometric stripes. Children streamed in for their first jazz dance class, following an instructor's lead under bright new LED lights. In the ceramic studio, a group of teens crouched over wheels, coaxing clay into bowls and vases, their laughter filling the formerly echoing halls. One boy held up his lopsided mug, beaming, and Marisol caught his eye. He mouthed "thank you" before dipping his finger in glaze. She realized then that the Gala's funds, born of confrontation and redemption, had already begun to transform lives. Back at headquarters the following Monday, she convened the first meeting of the newly formed Arts Impact Council, composed of grant recipients, student representatives, and board liaisons. Their task? To establish metrics for success, gather ongoing feedback from participants, and ensure every dollar invested unfolded into a genuine opportunity. They hashed out quarterly check-ins, photo and video reports, and community forums where families could share their experiences. Marisol insisted on including stories of personal growth as part of every report, so the numbers would never eclipse the human journeys they quantified. Across the city, the traveling mural project hit its stride. Marisol traveled by van from site to site, watching as young artists painted vibrant scenes of hope on grey walls. A phoenix rising from abstract bricks, a mother cradling a book, a child's hand reaching for a paintbrush. Passers-by paused, their faces lifted in surprise, then in applause. Local shops began selling postcards featuring the murals, with proceeds funneled back into the program. When Marisol arrived at her office one morning, her desk was covered in thank you notes from community leaders, letters of gratitude for reclaiming neglected spaces into canvases of possibility. By the end of the year, the Monarch Trust's annual impact report told a story of transformation. 3,500 students reached, 7 centers renovated, 12 traveling exhibits, 20 high school seniors awarded scholarships. But more telling were the personal testimonials. A formerly incarcerated youth who found solace in drama class. A single mother who joined a quilting circle and sold her first textile design. A shy 4th grader who discovered confidence in a painting workshop. Each story echoed the truth Marisol had rediscovered at the Gala. That investment in art is investment in humanity itself. As the next Gala invitations circulated, this time honoring community heroes alongside corporate sponsors, Marisol Kane understood that the real work had only just begun. The ballroom's chandelier glow and harsh taunts had given way to daylight's gentle promise on those freshly painted walls. And in every brushstroke, every bowed note, and every repaired rooftop, she saw the quiet power of turning hostility into hope, and the enduring impact that follows when compassion refuses to be silenced. By early spring, the programs funded by the power Gala had moved beyond mere ribbon-cutting ceremonies into the challenging reality of implementation. And Marisol found herself at the heart of both triumphs and tests. On a crisp Monday morning, she arrived at the Riverbend Community Center, where the first of the traveling mural projects was now in its 3rd week. Under a soaring brick wall previously blank and unremarked, a diverse team of local youth labored with rollers, spray cans, and brushes. The image had begun as a phoenix rising from fractured concrete. Now it pulsed with fresh life. Vibrant teals, golds, and coral sweeping skyward in feathery arcs. But as Marisol approached, she noticed tensions rippling through the group. Two 14-year-old artists, Jasmine and Ricardo, stood apart, arms folded, arguing in low tones. Ricardo flushed as he shook his head. "You keep painting over my lines," he snapped. Jasmine shot back. "Your colors don't fit the theme." Marisol stepped between them, raising her hands. "Let's pause," she said calmly. "Tell me what each of you envisions." Ricardo's voice wavered. "I wanted the flames to look fierce, like we're rising, not just floating." Jasmine's eyes softened. "I thought the phoenix should feel hopeful, so I made the feathers light." Marisol nodded, letting the spring air fill the pause. "Both are right," she said. "A phoenix is fire and flight. Ricardo, can you keep your bold edges but sketch them higher? Jasmine, can you blend those lighter tones at the tips?" The teens exchanged wary glances, then nodded. Within minutes, their brushes moved with synchronized strokes, the mural's narrative enriched by their collaboration. That afternoon, Marisol convened the Arts Impact Council in the center's multi-purpose room, now accessorized with jars of leftover paint, prototype sketches, and seating for a dozen volunteers. She asked for progress reports from each project leader. The ceramic studio in Eastwood, now stocked with new wheels and kilns. The after-school drama troupe rehearsing in a freshly gutted feed store that now served as a performance space. The mobile sculpture lab, whose converted van had just completed its first stop at a suburban park. Each leader shared challenges, sourcing sustainable clay, coordinating rehearsal schedules around transportation gaps, and maintaining the sculpture truck's engine. But also victories, record enrollment, local press coverage, and a budding sense of civic pride among participants. Then came the hardest part of the meeting, budgeting. The Trust's outstanding pledges were nearly exhausted and some programs faced material shortages. Marisol produced the latest financial report. While $600,000 had been allocated, only $450,000 had been spent, much of it on infrastructure, leaving $150,000 for ongoing operations. Yet the council had 12 active sites clamoring for funds. A hush fell as they tallied travel costs, instructor stipends, and supply orders. Marisol cleared her throat. "We have two choices," she said. "We can scale back and let some programs pause, or we can launch a community fundraiser, drawing on the momentum we created at the Gala to sustain this growth." A board liaison looked uneasy, remembering last fall's sharp interruption and its subsequent triumph. But a teacher from the drama troupe spoke up. "We'll host a benefit performance. Our students on that very stage. Tickets at $20. Half goes back into the program." Heads began to nod. Within minutes, they sketched out a plan for a spring showcase at the city's cultural hall, complete with student-designed posters and a social media campaign. That evening, Marisol dropped by the drama rehearsal at the converted feed store. 15 students, costumes half-mended and scripts in hand, ran through a scene about community resilience. At the climactic moment, the lead actor, an introverted sophomore named Malik, delivered a powerful monologue about finding voice through the arts. Marisol watched from the back, her chest tight with pride. Afterward, Malik approached hesitantly. "Miss Kane," he said, voice low, "I never thought I'd speak in front of more than my mirror." He smiled shyly. "This program, it saved me." As she left, Marisol checked her phone. A private message from the Monarch Trust's communications director. "We've secured a matching grant of $75,000 for your fundraiser. If we raise $75,000 by May 1st, it doubles. Let's call it the Community Phoenix Challenge." Marisol's heart soared. This multiplier would keep every program running through summer camps and beyond. Over the next 3 weeks, she crisscrossed the city, coordinating rehearsals, visiting pottery wheels, drafting grant applications, and rallying local businesses to sponsor the showcase. She watched as volunteers printed posters, students delivered them door to door, and local radio stations broadcast interviews with grateful parents. When the fundraiser night arrived, the cultural hall overflowed. Families, educators, and curious newcomers packed the seats. The drama troupe's performance moved many to tears. A silent auction of student artwork raised unexpected bids. And when the final tally appeared on the big screen, $82,000 raised, the crowd erupted in cheers, meeting the challenge and unlocking the year. Match. As Marisol stepped off stage, her gown whispered across the polished floor, she realized that Chapter 5 of this journey was not just about funding art. It was about sustaining hope through cooperation, teaching conflict resolution through murals, and proving that even when resources run thin, a community's creativity and generosity can keep the flame of possibility burning bright. By midsummer, the success of the Spring Showcase had catapulted the Monarch Trust's arts initiatives into the regional spotlight, and with that visibility came both opportunity and complexity. On a humid Thursday morning, Marisol found herself stepping off the commuter train in Riverton, a neighboring city that had invited her to consult on launching their own community arts network. The station's modern facade was adorned with banners quoting last spring's fundraising total, $157,000 raised. And Marisol felt a tingle of pride mixed with apprehension. Could she replicate what had taken months of trial and error in her own city, compressed into a single weekend of workshops? Her first stop was the Riverton Youth Centre, a gleaming converted warehouse with bright murals already in progress on its exterior walls. Inside, a dozen local volunteers waited in a semicircle, paint spattered and eager. Marisol greeted each by name, thanks to her assistant's meticulous briefing, and dove into a half-day crash course on community-driven mural planning, emphasizing the conflict resolution techniques she had honed when Jasmine and Ricardo had clashed over the phoenix's feathers. As she demonstrated collaborative sketching exercises, a group of high school seniors began to argue passionately, this time over-representing the city's waterfront industries. Marisol smiled. Familiar sparks of debate were the raw material for creative breakthroughs. Within minutes, she guided them to reframe the dispute as a dual-focus mural, blending cranes and boats with soaring gulls, each element honoring economic and ecological heritage. When they stepped back to admire the sketch, their nervous smiles blossomed into laughter of shared ownership. That afternoon, Marisol convened a round table at City Hall with the mayor, the parks director, and representatives from 2 local foundations. They tabled timelines for grant disbursement, zoning permissions for outdoor exhibits, and partnerships with the school district. The parks director warned of bureaucratic delays. Permits could take up to 8 weeks, while the mayor insisted on showing results before election season. Marisol suggested a pilot pop-up exhibit in vacant storefronts, requiring only a week's turnaround and minimal red tape. The compromise passed unanimously, and by day's end, the City Hall bulletin board was plastered with pop-up art crawl posters, designed on the spot by local graphics students. In the evening, Marisol attended a networking dinner at the Riverton Arts Guild, a candlelit affair where she was introduced as the woman who tamed a scandal into a movement. Conversation buzzed around her. Journalists sought sound bites, foundation, chairs pitched collaboration, and a veteran council member confessed that she had been skeptical after the Gala interruption, only to become one of Marisol's most enthusiastic donors. As she sipped her wine, Marisol realized how her journey had shifted from firefighting bigotry on a stage to architecting systems that preempt it. From silencing a heckler with art to empowering dozens of communities to create their own. Back at home the next morning, Marisol collapsed into her favorite armchair, exhaustion pulling at her bones as she scrolled through photos of East Side families at the week's first pop-up, graffiti artists teaching toddlers, and the eventual granting of those 8-week permits thanks to pressure from newly engaged citizens. Her phone pinged. A message from Jasmine, the Eastwood muralist, reporting that Ricardo had proposed an art therapy program at their high school, inspired by the mural process. Another ping from Malik, the drama student, announcing the next benefit performance's theme, Phoenix Rising 2. But there was little time for rest. By Tuesday, Marisol was back in the boardroom for the Monarch Trust's quarterly review, where trustees, flying in from across the state, eagerly compared metrics from 3 cities. They applauded Riverton's pilot, authorised funding for 2 more pop-up tours, and greenlit an online portal for communities nationwide to apply for startup grants based on Marisol's blueprint. One trustee asked, voice hushed, "Is there capacity for national expansion?" Marisol hesitated. She'd spent the past year logging 50-hour weeks, balancing high-profile events, community crises, and now into city consultancy. Yet her passion remained undimmed. "With careful partnerships," she replied, "and keeping community voices at the core, yes, we can." The board's unanimous nod felt like another first bow on a still unfinished stage. That weekend, as she strolled through a quiet park near her own neighborhood, Marisol paused beneath the original Eastwood mural, now fully restored after winter weather. The phoenix's wings, once merely hopeful, now shone with layered texture and depth, each feather a story of collaboration and compromise. She ran her fingers through the cool evening air, imagining the next chapter: pop-up exhibits in tribal reservations, mobile workshops in rural towns, a digital archive of student portfolios. And though fatigue tugged at her eyelids, her heart pulsed with the same fierce rhythm she had invoked on that gala night. Proof that when one act of reclaimed purpose sparks another, creativity becomes the catalyst for boundless, sustainable change. A year later, the Monarch Trust's grand ballroom glittered once more with crystal chandeliers and ribbon centerpieces. But tonight's atmosphere carried a different energy, one of quiet confidence rather than anxious possibility. As donors in tuxedos and evening gowns slid into their seats, they passed programs printed on recycled cardstock, depicting vibrant murals, smiling drama students mid-performance, and sleek mobile art labs at local parks. Each image a testament to a year of meaningful transformation. Marisol Kane, now lionized as the catalyst of compassion, slipped onto the stage in a deep emerald gown, its hem sweeping the floor like a promise kept, and surveyed the audience with a nearly imperceptible smile. When the orchestra's final notes faded, she leaned into the microphone and began without preamble. "Tonight, we celebrate not only what your generosity has built, but the lives it has changed." Behind her, the projection screen glowed with a mosaic of faces: a high school senior holding her scholarship award, a young girl cradling her first ceramic vase, an Eastwood muralist gazing up at her phoenix. "In the past 12 months," Marisol continued, "we have renovated 4 community arts centers, engaged over 5,000 children in after-school programs, and launched pop-up exhibits that have traveled to 3 neighboring cities. But the greatest success, I believe, is that we have shown that art, and the boldness to defend it, unites us more deeply than any disagreement can divide us." As her words settled, she invited 2 student ambassadors to the stage: Jasmine Nowen, award-winning muralist, and Malik, the young actor whose monologue had revived the gala's hopeful spirit. They shared brief reflections. Jasmine described how her contested design process taught her collaboration was the soul of creativity, and Malik spoke of newfound confidence on stage and off. Their voices, infused with lived experience, filled the hall far more richly than any speech of gratitude. When they stepped down, Marisol gestured toward the tables, now heavy with donation envelopes and tablets for online pledges. "But our work is far from over," she said firmly. "Tonight, I ask each of you to join us in pledging for the next chapter, because when we invest in expression, we invest in the resilience of our entire community." A hush fell that felt less like suspense and more like shared determination. Then envelopes rustled and screens lit up as donors stood one by one: senators, corporate CEOs, neighborhood patrons, to offer renewed support. Each pledge exceeded the last, culminating in a sum that surpassed even the previous gala's record. Applause rang out not as a formality, but as a chorus of commitment. Later, during the reception, Marisol circulated among the clusters of guests. She paused by a table where Veronica Hastings, the Gala president, raised her glass. I never imagined I'd be so moved by a heckler's interruption, Veronica admitted with a laugh, eyes shining. But that moment forced us to confront our biases. And now, look at us. A network of artists, activists, and allies, spanning this entire region. Marisol nodded, gratitude warming her chest. Across the room, the original disruptor, the man who had shouted his bigotry, stood quietly near the exit, envelope in hand. Marisol approached and took it from him gently. He offered a brief, sincere apology as she slipped the check into a basket. "We all grow," he said, voice sincere. "Thank you for the lesson." As the night wound down and the last guests filed out, Marisol returned to the empty stage and surveyed the photographs that lined its edge. Snapshots of every champion. The students, the volunteers, the once skeptical, philanthropists who had become steadfast supporters. She ran her fingers along the edge of the lectern, remembering how fragile hope had once been that evening when hostility erupted. Now that same crowd would call her to speak at national conferences, to mentor emerging non-profit leaders, and to advise new coalitions expanding this model nationwide. Standing alone in the amber-lit ballroom, Marisol realized that Chapter 7 was more than a conclusion. It was the threshold of a movement whose heartbeat would continue in classrooms, studios, sidewalks, and beyond. And as she turned off the lights and walked through the silent hall, she carried with her the steady rhythm of progress. Proof that a single act of courage at a gala could indeed blossom into a legacy bright enough to light every corner where creativity and compassion converge.